And it's really my pleasure, and I thank you again for the invitation. So in fact, the title of my presentation was a bit different. We here want to talk about the impact of ischemia trial, which is of course important because there was a lot of discussion after the publication of ischemia last year. So we know that the PCI in stable angina was discussed by this controversial trial, Orbita trial, which was a double-blind randomized controlled trial, but most important than Orbita, because it's probably better conducted than Orbita trial, is the ischemia trial, which was comparing not only PCI versus medical treatment, but invasive strategy versus conservative strategy in stable coronary disease. And the primary endpoint was neutral in both groups, as you can see, with some crossing of the two curves around 2 years. And this primary endpoint was a composite of cardiac death, myocardial infarction, rehospitalization for unstable angina or heart failure, and cardiac arrest with resuscitation. So apparently a negative trial for or not positive trial for invasive strategy, but we need to go in deep. We need to dive in this data to understand how it was conducted. It was a huge trial. A lot of money was spent for this trial. We heard about $100 million of US, which is huge for a trial which was involving more than 8,000 patients, as you can see. And the way to enroll the patients in this trial was a non-invasive ischemia test, which was initially only scintigraphy, PET scan, stress echo, or stress MRI. But you cannot enroll already very fast with this criteria. They expand the inclusion criteria to regular stress tests. And you can see that they enroll more than 8,000 patients, but a lot of them have been lost. 16% of them have been lost because the test was not positive. In fact, 14% have been lost at the time of the CT scan, coronary CT scan, because there was no obstructive disease. And eventually, they randomized 5,179 patients. There was a gatekeeper in this trial in order to be sure that we include only ischemic patients, which was FFR, but FFR was used only in 20% of cases. And despite all the gatekeepers we have in this trial, we can see that 9% of the patients have been enrolled without any coronary lesion. And these patients are taken into account in the analysis. That explains that in a total of population allocated for revascularization, only 80% of them had eventually a real revascularization. 3/4 PCI, 1/4 of CABG. So this is the reason why when we analyze the population, you can see that the patient who do not fill the eligibility criteria but have been randomized are the patients who have the worst outcome, of course, so they have no benefit of this invasive strategy. For the same reason, the patients who have no ischemia or limited ischemia by core lab laboratory have less benefit from the invasive strategy than the patient with moderate or severe ischemia. So this is the reason why it's really representing the difficulty to conduct this kind of trial in a stable patient. Very broad inclusion criteria, but a lot of exclusion criteria. We are not going into the detail of this long list of exclusion criteria, but that explains that from pre-world to ischemia, who enroll in 6 years in 320 centers, can see how long it takes to enroll this patient. Only 3% of these patients are presented in real-world stable patient revascularization. So really, it's a very, very selected population as you can see, only 3% of real-world practice. So is it the last nail in the coffin of PCI? I don't think so. Because in ischemia, as it was in the previous trial, revascularization was better than medical treatment for angina. You can see that in Orbita trial, more you have ischemia, more you have benefit on angina. And this is the same thing in ischemia trial. We can see that we have patients who are not so symptomatic in ischemia trial. 1/3 have no angina. But of course, if you have angina, particularly if this angina is frequent, you have a strong benefit of revascularization versus conservative strategy. On less angina you have, of course, less benefit you have on angina. Revascularization is also better than medical treatment on terms of ischemia. It was already shown in FEM2, Dynamic 3 and Compare Acute that when you revascularize the patient, you have benefit on the strong criteria, cardiac death or MI. And this is the same in regarding the blue curve, the conservative approach, invasive patient, whatever it was, CI, cabbage, or medical treatment, invasive cohort has significantly less myocardial infarction at follow-up. And if you look at the meta-analysis taking into account the ischemia trial, you can see that we are favoring revascularization in terms of MI. What about cardiac mortality? No benefit on cardiac death, of course, even if we have a trend, it's not significant. It was clear, but the subgroup of patients with previous heart failure or left ventricular dysfunction seems to benefit from the invasive strategy. What we'll learn, in fact, if we look at this meta-analysis from Bangalore from the 90s to 2020, we are relatively stable in terms of effect on cardiovascular death. We are on the good side in terms of benefit, but not significant. But if we consider spontaneous myocardial infarction, we are improving our results with the time. And clearly, it's a progressive but sustained benefit from revascularization versus medical treatment in terms of myocardial infarction. The question now in 2021 is, can we do better? Can we do a better job? I think to do a better job, we have 3 points to follow. The first one is the patient selection. As explained by Dr. Alami, who was a PI of Orbita trial, if you keep the causality link between the stenosis, the hemodynamic impact of this stenosis, the ischemia and the symptoms, you have certainty of benefit. But if you miss some steps in this causality chain, you have clearly a risk of having less benefit because you are not treating the right patient. And in this causality chain, the role of FFR is crucial. Another point where we can do a better job is to have a good impact on periprocedural MI. We can do a better job in some complex lesion like calcified lesion or bifurcation lesion to reduce the risk of periprocedural MI, but the impact of periprocedural MI is significant when you consider CK analysis. But if you go to the second definition of MI in ischemia trial, which was based on troponin, you can see there is no longer effect in terms of cardiac death using the secondary definition. And last point, we can do a better job in terms of patient follow-up. In ischemia trial, the patient have a very good control of risk factors. If you look at the LDL value, the treatment of hypertension, it's really extremely good and not really representing the real practice. So clearly it's important also to think about the control of risk factor after PCI. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Bernard. Raymond.
Professor Chevalier, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
First of all, welcome. It's always wonderful to see you, although it's more wonderful when in person when you come to Alexandria and Cairo. Still, it's always good to see you, even if it's virtual. We thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, and I could tell you have so many more points you would like to add. And I enjoyed your critique of some of the inclusion and exclusion criteria and the many defects in this trial. As you mentioned, they had 28 groups of patients that were excluded from a trial looking at ischemia. And at the end, the patient population represented, as you mentioned, only 3.3% of the actual patients we all see in practice. I would like to add, mention 3 points. I would like to get your opinion on them, which I think are important. The first one is the issue of, I would have liked in the conclusion, because of the points you mentioned, the patient population had low-grade angina, such that there was infrequent angina. They intentionally excluded patients with more angina, so they ended up in the trial with patients having very infrequent angina, around 1 or 2 per month. So perhaps in the conclusion, perhaps they should have added, our results apply to patients with very infrequent angina. The second issue is the issue which was really, to me, the most important thing in the trial, was that even in patients with large areas of ischemia, there was no difference in optimum medical therapy compared to PCI, which really opens up the issue of how defective we are in looking at and analyzing ischemia. We tend to look at ischemia on the myocardial perfusion imaging as yes or no, small, moderate, or large. Whereas I think it's actually more dynamic, it's more fluid. And perhaps the best example is the model of the patient we see with a single vessel disease, chronic CTO, receiving collaterals, and you follow the patient for many years and they're doing fine. And then suddenly they become symptomatic. Something is happening. And you do the cath and there's no change, no new lesions. So it's an interplay between the microcirculation, and it's not just what's happening at the angiography. There's an interplay with the microcirculation, and we are unable to really look at the fluidity of ischemia. We say yes or no. The last point is PCI improved dramatically, as you mentioned, angina in the study, as in all the studies. However, it was only in 50%. PCI obviously needs to do better than that. Why is it only 50%? Obviously, there is something, again, at the microcirculation, or as was shown in a study a couple of months ago that showed that about 25% of patients with a successful procedure, stenting, when you look by FFR, they still had inadequate FFR.
Okay. Any comment, Bernard, for these points?
Yes, I think it's very important, as you say, to have a good result on FFR is certainly something we should add in our armamentarium for evaluating the final result of PCI. I fully agree. And again, it's very important to be sure that we are relieving the ischemia at the end of the PCI. certainly something we should consider. The absence of FFR before and after in most of the patients in the ischemia trial is certainly an important limitation. I fully agree. Sorry, I missed a little bit the first part of the comment because we were disconnected at the beginning. But at least for the last point, I fully agree about that.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, yes.
Okay, the first point was the incidence of angina in the population was very low, very infrequent angina. It was about 1 to 2 angina episodes per month. So they should, in the conclusion, say that the results apply to patients with very low angina frequency. Because the way it is now, it's very misleading. The second issue was the issue of ischemia. I think we have a simplistic view of ischemia. We have an MPI that says yes, no, small, moderate, large area. But it's actually fluid. It's not yes or no. It's not binary. Because we see the best model is the model of the patient with a CTO getting collaterals, and the patient has minimal angina. They do well, no symptoms, many years, and then suddenly they have symptoms. You cath the patient, no change in the coronary anatomy, the collaterals are there, but obviously something is happening at the microcellular level. So the ischemia here would be fluid and moving and dynamic compared to the ischemia when the patient was stable. We don't have proper means to adequately assess what's happening at the cellular level in ischemia. Your comment?
Yes, I agree about what you say. Of course, it's always difficult to randomize patients versus medical treatment when they are very symptomatic because they want the invasive treatment and they don't want to be randomized versus medical therapy. This is clearly one of the limitations, and that explains why it was so long to enroll 5,000 patients in 300 centers. You will need 6 years to enroll the patient, which is huge, of course. So this is the difficulty of this kind of trial who are very far from the real world practice and the routine practice. I agree about the second point, which is, of course, it's not always binary, but of course we have to make decision at the time of we see the patient. And again, I think the FFR is extremely important because the FFR is the only way to establish with certainty the link between the stenosis, the hemodynamic impact of the stenosis, the presence of ischemia, and the symptom of the patient. This causality chain is extremely important because if you follow all the steps of this chain, you are sure that when you treat the lesion, if you achieve a good result, you will be effective on the symptoms.
Okay, another question. Thank you, Ahmed Said.
I have one more question, please. Moderate to severe ischemia and are receiving medical treatment there, and they are well controlled on medical treatment, and they don't have any anginal attacks. We should even send the patient to the cath lab to have a coronary angiography to exclude critical anatomy, or do a CT coronary angiography to exclude, for example, a critical left main disease. And the question is, if you have a patient who have chronic stable angina and is now controlled on medical treatment, and you find him having a significant left main disease, would you keep him on medical treatment as long as he's still controlled on medical treatment, or you will do a coronary intervention?
I think, again, I will think this patient is a good candidate for angiography on FFR. And again, the FFR will give us the answer to this question. If we have positive FFR on the left main, even if the patient has no symptoms on medical treatment, I think we should treat this left main.
Bernard, you have 3 trials in the world: the CARRIAGE trial, and then Orbita trial, and then ischemia trials. So what's your algorithm if you don't have an FFR in your core lab? Because actually not in Egypt, in our country, we don't have FFR except in a very specialized centers, and it's not reimbursed by the governments. So do you think that we go the patient out of the cath lab to do the integraphy to see the amount of ischemia still at the carriage say 10% or not, or depending on the anatomical lesion, either the proximal LAD or an ostial LAD, or maybe it's a long lesions with extended with diabetic patient. How do you assess the patient? Are you still going with the ischemia regarding the angina, or just if the patient control on treatment? There is no angina, but it is a critical lesion now, and the ischemia more than 15%. So how to deal with the patient in Paris Sud? And in Egypt as well. Yeah.
It's difficult to answer to your question. In Paris Sud, we'll do FFR in this situation for sure, because I think it's the only way to solve properly this issue. Of course, if you can have no access to FFR because it's not reimbursed or the patient cannot pay for it, cannot afford it, so I think we should consider to take the decision on non-invasive evaluation on angiography. And of course, if the patient is has no evaluation before angiography, no evaluation of ischemia, I think probably it's not a good candidate for PCI in the same session, if it's stable patient, of course.
Okay, we have two simple questions and two direct answers, please. Okay, Dr. Wael Kelani and Dr. Magid Ramses.
In a very rapid way, what do you do in your center? For example, a patient came with chronic stable angina, and then we gave him medical treatment, he improved. Then we stress him, and we have a myocardial perfusion defect, for example, of 6-7% on a workload of 7-8 meds. So he's doing fine. And the patient is okay for his state of activity. He's, for example, 70 years, and for his state of activity, this is fine for him, and he's not having chest pain at his regular activity. Do you still delineate the anatomy or not? Or
yes.
Keep him in medical treatment? You got the question?
Yes, okay.
Yes, we go to an anatomical test. It could be CT scan or coronary angiography, but we need to know the anatomy.
For all the patients?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Well, عشان to see the left main أو ostial. Yes, Magid.
It's simple. I need a direct answer. If you have a calcific left main lesion, and in my institute I have both FFR and IVUS. To be accurate, if this left main will be stented or not, you depend in FFR or IVUS regarding the minimum human area cut point is 6 millimeter. Which is more accurate
FFR.
and which is preferable?
FFR.
Better than the IVUS and the minimal human area 6 millimeters as a cut point?
For the decision of making a PCI or treating medically, FFR is better than IVUS.
Okay. Thank you, Bernard. Then coming, thank you very, very much for this wonderful presentation regarding the ischemia. I heard this from Lefebvre that you are having this lecture.